In the late 1980s, a belief started spreading through the streets of Philadelphia. One organization wasn't just trying to compete anymore, it was trying to take everything: territory, money, power. It didn't matter. If it could be controlled and turned into profit, they wanted it. At the center of that expansion was Aaron A.J. Jones, a man prosecutors, rivals, and former associates all pointed to as a key figure in a fast-growing empire that seemed to tighten its grip with every passing neighborhood. And as that reach spread block by block, so did the warnings. You either joined them, got out of their way, or dealt with the consequences. But how did it all get to that point? How did this organization grow into one of the most feared forces Philadelphia had ever seen? The story starts with Aaron Jones. You see, Aaron A.J. Jones entered the world in 1962 and grew up in West Philadelphia as one of 13 children. From an early age, he found himself surrounded by people connected to the streets. His older brother Eddie was tied to the infamous Black Mafia organization, and a young AJ spent his days running errands and shining shoes for men who were already making names for themselves in Philadelphia's underworld. But AJ wasn't always fully committed to that life. After graduating from West Philadelphia Catholic High School for Boys in 1979, he enrolled at Temple University. For a moment, it looked like he might take a different path, but the streets kept pulling him back. Before long, he was standing on the corner of 52nd Street and Walton Avenue, selling $10 vials of crack cocaine just steps away from his brother Ike's dry cleaning business. Then came 1985, and everything changed. Most of the original Black Mafia leadership was either dead, locked up, or no longer active, leaving a massive power vacuum across Philadelphia's drug trade. Seeing an opportunity, Jones and several associates decided it was time for a new generation to take control. Together, Aaron Jones, James Cole, Haywood Cole, Rick Jones, Benjamin Benny Goff, Tracy Mason, Leonard Basil Patterson, and Mark Goldie Casey formed what became known as the Young Black Mafia, or YBM. Street rumors claimed Aaron Jones was fascinated with the movie The Godfather. People said he studied the mannerisms of Don Vito Corleone and modeled much of his image after the legendary crime boss portrayed by Marlon Brando. Whether true or not, one thing was certain. Throughout Philadelphia, Jones developed a reputation as a man who commanded respect everywhere he went. At the beginning, the group's vision seemed straightforward. The founders wanted to capitalize on Philadelphia's booming crack epidemic, generate enormous profits, and eventually invest that money into legitimate businesses. Every founding member contributed $1,000 to get the organization off the ground. They also agreed to put another $1,000 into a shared fund every week, money specifically intended to build legal ventures outside the drug trade. Joining the organization wasn't easy either. Unlike many street gangs, the group reportedly preferred recruits with clean criminal records. The idea was simple: less police attention meant more opportunities to grow. The organization initially established itself in Germantown, and the timing couldn't have been better. At the same time, the powerful Scarfo crime family was tearing itself apart through internal conflicts, murders, and power struggles. While everyone else was distracted, the YBM quietly expanded. Leading much of that growth was James Cole. Under his direction, the organization began absorbing smaller drug crews throughout Germantown. Some groups joined willingly, others didn't have much of a choice. Either way, YBM territory kept expanding block by block. Their operations looked almost military. Cocaine was often sold from heavily fortified houses equipped with reinforced doors and windows. Customers couldn't simply walk inside. Transactions were conducted through mail slots, keeping dealers hidden from both customers and police. But narcotics weren't the only source of income. Investigators and organized crime experts later linked the organization to gambling operations, extortion schemes, and other criminal ventures. Reports even suggested certain members had relationships with individuals connected to Philadelphia's Italian mafia families, creating alliances that stretched across different criminal worlds. Inside the city, the group's influence became impossible to ignore. Former associates described an organization that demanded complete obedience. Anyone viewed as a threat or obstacle often found themselves facing serious consequences. As second in command, Aaron Jones played a critical role. He managed finances, distributed narcotics, and oversaw the movement of cocaine and crack from suppliers down to street-level dealers. Much of that product reportedly came through James Cole's California connection, Earl Mustafa Stewart. With a steady supply and growing influence, the organization began swallowing up more territory. Stories spread throughout Philadelphia about dealers being pressured to either join the operation or move out of the way. While Jones would later deny many of those stories, law enforcement and local media embraced the image of an organization determined to dominate every market it touched. And by the mid-1980s, a major rival emerged. John Craig Haynes had built a substantial drug network across West Oak Lane, South Philadelphia, and Olney. When YBM allegedly attempted to absorb his operation, Haynes refused. That refusal reportedly led to a brazen daytime shootout near Philadelphia City Hall, a confrontation that instantly elevated tensions throughout the city's drug underworld. Not long afterward, the organization underwent a rebranding. The word Young was dropped and replaced with Junior, creating the name that would become legendary throughout Philadelphia history, the Junior Black Mafia, better known as the JBM. By then, members weren't trying to stay low profile. JBM members became famous for wearing custom gold rings decorated with 29 diamonds, spelling out the organization's initials. Every Sunday, they gathered at Beaumont Plateau in Fairmount Park, showing off luxury cars, expensive jewelry, and newfound wealth for the entire city to see. Aaron Jones embraced the image completely. He drove eye-catching vehicles that stood out even in an era known for flashy drug dealers. One of his most talked about rides was a Saab, customized with a Gucci interior. He also owned a Volvo 780 designed by the prestigious Italian coach builder Bertone, a rare luxury vehicle that had only recently entered the American market. Despite their growing visibility, the JBM somehow managed to avoid major law enforcement attention for nearly 2 years. Eventually, however, authorities began noticing something strange. Luxury cars were appearing everywhere across Germantown. Mercedes-Benzes, BMWs, Volvos, many displaying custom JBM monograms. A large number of those vehicles were regularly spotted at ATEC, an auto detailing business owned by Benjamin Goffer. That activity caught the attention of investigators and eventually triggered a major inquiry by the Pennsylvania Crime Commission. Then came the violence. On July 12, 1988, a man named Mark Lisby was shot multiple times outside of Philadelphia residence. Authorities alleged the shooter was Anthony Tone Reed, the organization's chief enforcer. According to investigators, the dispute centered around just $150 worth of cocaine. Lisby never recovered from his injuries. Months later, John Craig Haynes also found himself targeted in another shooting. Unlike Lisby, he survived. Meanwhile, police pressure kept increasing. On December 1st, 1988, Philadelphia narcotics officers launched a major series of raids targeting JBM operations. Several key members were arrested, including Jules Pickard, James Gaines, David Shabazz, William McNeil, and co-founder Tracy Mason. Yet even with arrests piling up, the organization continued expanding. Reports from the Pennsylvania Crime Commission suggested the JBM was conducting business with members of Philadelphia's mafia, including associates connected to future mob boss Joseph Salvatore Skinny Joey Merlino. By 1989, the organization reached another turning point. For years, Southwest Philadelphia had been shared between JBM and the Nelson Brothers organization. That balance disappeared when the Nelson Empire collapsed. Rick Big Roche, Nelson received federal drug convictions and was sent to prison, while Wayne Little Roachy Nelson was murdered. With those rivals gone, JBM expanded rapidly. The organization now controlled major sections of north central Philadelphia, Mount Airy, southwest Philadelphia, parts of South and West Philadelphia, and of course Germantown itself. At its peak, law enforcement estimated the organization employed more than 300 people. What had started as a street operation now resembled a corporate enterprise. Then, on January 6, 1989, another major figure fell. Marvin Robinson, known on the streets as Big D, surrendered to authorities after a wave of police raids targeted his stash houses. Investigators seized an enormous amount of property, including vehicles, motorcycles, hundreds of thousands of dollars in cash, firearms, jewelry, fur coats, crack cocaine, and several pounds of powdered cocaine. Even as law enforcement closed in, many JBM leaders were already investing heavily in legitimate businesses. By the summer of 1989, Rick Jones had accumulated roughly 20 properties and business interests throughout Philadelphia. His holdings included businesses such as Wincoat Auto Cleaners and the Queen Lane Deli in Germantown. Benjamin Goff followed a similar strategy. He owned multiple automotive businesses, including Rims Plus, Philadelphia Auto Works Limited, and a luxury used car dealership known as the Automobile Bank in Manayunk. At that point, the JBM had evolved far beyond a neighborhood drug crew, but as the violence around the JBM kept escalating, members started treating bulletproof vests like everyday clothing. They weren't wearing them for style. They were wearing them because they genuinely believed they might get shot at any moment. But all those shootings created another problem. The more bodies dropped, the more attention the organization attracted. Before long, law enforcement agencies from every direction started closing in. The DEA, FBI, ATF, IRS, Pennsylvania State Police, and Philadelphia Police all joined forces in a massive effort to dismantle the organization once and for all. By 1989, that pressure was already producing results, with authorities seizing more than $1 million in cash, vehicles, property, and other assets connected to the group. At the same time, the violence was spiraling completely out of control. According to investigators, between April 1988 and August 1989, the JBM was linked to roughly 25 murders. Every new shooting brought more headlines, more police attention, and more pressure on the organization. One example came on February 2nd, 1989. Twin brothers Guy and Gil Matthews, both associated with John Craig Haynes' organization, were charged with murder, conspiracy, and aggravated assault in connection to the killing of James Suswell. Investigators said the twins spotted Suswell sitting in a vehicle with two friends in North Philadelphia. Believing he was connected to the JBM, they opened fire. The case quickly expanded. Lonnie Gallman, Vernon Hawkins, and John Craig Haynes himself were eventually tied to the investigation. In the end, Haynes would receive a life sentence for his role in the murder. Meanwhile, inside the JBM, paranoia was becoming just as dangerous as the rival gangs. Aaron Jones reportedly began suspecting that two associates, Darrell Hickey Mo Woods and Neil Phil Wilkinson, were cooperating with federal authorities. Whether the suspicions were true or not almost didn't matter. According to prosecutors, Jones ordered trusted enforcers Anthony Tone Reed and Kevin Black Bowman to eliminate both men. On March 13th, the attack came. Wilkinson was killed, Woods survived, but after being struck by multiple bullets, he was left permanently paralyzed. And that wasn't even the end of the bloodshed that month. In another shocking incident, Anthony Reed shot and killed 16-year-old Michael Waters. Investigators said the entire confrontation started after the teenager accidentally hit Reed's vehicle with a snowball. Years later, Reed would be convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to death for the killing. Around the same period, another JBM member, Reginald Rittenberg, was murdered in West Philadelphia. Street rumors claimed he had been skimming money from the organization, though the full circumstances remain murky. The war with the Haynes organization also continued. On June 29th, Byron Lawrence, a gunman tied to Haynes, allegedly carried out a shooting targeting professional boxer Anthony Two Guns Fletcher and his associate Eric Hurst. Prosecutors claimed Haynes believed both men had connections to the JBM. Fletcher survived, Hurst did not. That same month, authorities landed another significant blow against the organization. Investigators raided the home of Aaron Jones's mother and uncovered a sizable stash that included cocaine, a .45 caliber handgun, approximately $140,000 in cash, expensive jewelry, and luxury fur coats. The message was becoming clear. Law enforcement wasn't just targeting the street dealers anymore. They were going after the leadership. Then came July 11th. According to prosecutors, Jones directed Christopher Dirty Black Laster, Stacy Rucker, and several other members to attack a rival drug operation on the corner of Moore Street and 24th Street in South Philadelphia. The shooters arrived and unleashed gunfire, but they missed their intended targets. Instead, innocent people paid the price. Sylvia Stinson was struck while trying to shield 3 children from the bullets. Another bystander, Willie Bowman, was killed despite having no involvement whatsoever in the conflict. Just 6 days later, Aaron Jones found himself in trouble again. While receiving treatment for an ulcer at Philadelphia Osteopathic Hospital, a nurse reportedly discovered a loaded .380 caliber handgun hidden beneath his pillow. Police arrested him immediately. The cycle of retaliation continued into August. On August 10th, members of the Haynes organization allegedly attempted to assassinate Jones inside a restaurant in West Oak Lane. Curtis Perry and Maximilian L. opened fire. Jones escaped unharmed. Others weren't so lucky. Donald Branch was killed, and 2 additional bystanders were wounded during the chaos. Weeks later, suspected Haynes associate Anthony Anderson was found shot to death on a back porch in Germantown, a killing many viewed as retaliation. By late August, the legal pressure was becoming relentless. On August 23rd, JBM leader James Cole was arrested on federal weapons charges in Bucks County. Just a week later, Aaron Jones found himself back in court facing attempted murder charges connected to the shooting of rival drug dealer Richard Isaac. According to investigators, Isaac had refused to conduct business with the JBM. For that decision, prosecutors claimed he became a target. Back on February 21st, 1989, Isaac was ambushed and shot 10 times. He survived but was left paralyzed from the waist down. Initially, Isaac identified Jones and Samuel Magic Brown as 2 of the attackers. Later, however, he recanted his testimony. Without his cooperation, prosecutors struggled to move forward, and both Jones and Brown were ultimately acquitted. The intimidation surrounding the case became impossible to ignore. During one court hearing, Ronald Rock Mason, a JBM member already under investigation for multiple murders, showed up carrying a loaded 9mm handgun while seated near Isaac's mother. Authorities immediately arrested him. Prosecutors viewed the incident as a blatant attempt to send a message. Mason was later convicted on firearms and drug-related charges. The organization also faced growing opposition from rival traffickers. After seeing how quickly the JBM was expanding, established figures like George Blakely, Leroy Keys, and Richard Spraggins began forming alliances of their own. Their goal was simple: combine resources and stop the JBM from taking over even more territory. At the same time, federal convictions were piling up. On September 6th, Tracy Harris received 7 years in federal prison without parole. James Gaines received 8. Several other members, including Jules Pickard, William McNeil, David Shabazz, and co-founder Tracy Mason, were convicted alongside them following a major drug raid. Federal agents had caught them inside a Mount Airy apartment packaging white powder for distribution. The evidence was overwhelming. Investigators recovered large amounts of cash, firearms, vehicles, scales, and drug packaging materials. By the fall of 1989, the organization was taking hits from every direction. On September 25th, Anthony Tone Reed was convicted on weapons charges tied to an earlier arrest. Then another tragedy struck from within. JBM co-founder Mark Goldie Casey died of a drug overdose while sitting in Holmesburg prison awaiting trial for murder. His cellmate happened to be fellow co-founder Leonard Basil Patterson. Both men had reportedly taken a dangerous street mixture known as pancakes and syrup, a combination of gluethamide pills and codeine cough syrup. Casey didn't survive. Patterson did, though he remained behind bars facing murder charges of his own. As October arrived, the legal losses continued. James Cole was officially convicted on his federal weapons case. Then, on November 3rd, violence erupted behind prison walls. While awaiting trial at the Philadelphia Industrial Correctional Center, Aaron Jones became involved in a brutal altercation with another inmate, Parrish Barnes. According to authorities, Jones repeatedly stabbed Barnes during the confrontation. Jones and Samuel Brown were later acquitted of attempted murder charges connected to the attack. But Jones wasn't completely cleared. He was convicted of aggravated assault and sent to Holmesburg prison, just one more case added to an already growing list of legal troubles. But even with Aaron Jones locked up and awaiting trial, the JBM machine didn't slow down. It kept moving like nothing had changed. According to investigators, the organization simply adjusted and kept operating. Leroy "Bucky" Davis stepped in to oversee day-to-day operations throughout West Philadelphia, Overbrook, Winfield, and South Philadelphia. Davis wasn't some unknown street figure either. Before fully diving into the drug game, he had been an amateur boxer. Around the city, he was easy to spot, usually wearing a huge gold chain with a diamond-covered pendant that proudly spelled out Bucky. At the same time, Brian "Moochie" Thornton took over as the organization's overall leader while Jones was locked away. Then came March 1990. The Pennsylvania Crime Commission released a major report declaring that the Junior Black Mafia had emerged with the goal of dominating Philadelphia's drug trade. The report also painted a dramatic picture of an all-out street war between the JBM and the infamous Jamaican Shower Posse. But according to people who were actually around during that era, the reality wasn't nearly as simple. Years later, many insiders claimed that much of the story surrounding this supposed war was fueled by information coming from informants and federal handlers who had their own agendas. The result was a narrative that spread through newspapers, television reports, and law enforcement briefings across the country. Regardless of how much was true and how much was exaggerated, the consequences were very real. James Cole later recalled a conversation he had while serving time at a federal prison in New York. One day, a member of the Shower Posse approached him wanting answers. The man had heard stories that Aaron Jones had publicly declared war on the organization during a television appearance and wanted to know why. Cole found the entire idea hard to believe. From his perspective, a high-ranking criminal figure wouldn't simply walk onto television and openly announce a war against another organization. To him, if something like that truly happened, there had to be bigger forces at work behind the scenes. The conversation took an even darker turn. According to Cole, the man explained that people had been shot because individuals on the street started assuming every black drug dealer in Philadelphia was connected to the JBM. In other words, innocent people ended up caught in the middle of a conflict they weren't even part of. Whether the war was real, exaggerated, or somewhere in between, the violence surrounding it was undeniable. Then came April 1990. The JBM suffered one of its biggest courtroom losses yet. Anthony Tone Reed, one of the organization's most feared enforcers, and Kevin Bowman, who helped oversee JBM operations in North Philadelphia, were both later convicted of first-degree murder. The case centered on the March 1989 killing of Neil Wilkinson, who was shot inside a stairwell at the Richard Allen Homes. But as investigators dug deeper, the picture only got darker. Ballistics linked the same weapon used in Wilkinson's murder to another killing just days earlier, the death of 16-year-old Michael Waters. And that wasn't the end of it. The very next day, JBM co-founder Leonard Basil Patterson was convicted of first-degree murder for the 1988 killing of rival drug dealer James Wesley Tate. A few days later, the sentences arrived. Patterson received life in prison. Bowman got life. Reed got life too. And for Reed, things only got worse from there. Later convictions connected him to additional murders, including the killing of Mark Lisby and the senseless shooting of Michael Waters, eventually earning him a death sentence. Meanwhile, trouble was brewing inside the organization itself. On May 14, 1990, 22-year-old Leroy Bucky Davis was gunned down on the porch of a West Philadelphia row house. According to later testimony, the person responsible wasn't a rival gang member. It was allegedly Brian Moochie Thornton. The murder sent shockwaves through the JBM. One of their own had allegedly taken out another high-ranking member. Naturally, people wanted revenge. That August, several key figures, including Aaron Jones, Samuel Brown, Bernard Fields, and others, reportedly met to discuss retaliation. The problem was that Thornton was already locked up on unrelated charges, making him difficult to reach. But Thornton's reputation for violence was already well established. Just months earlier, on June 10, 1990, he had been involved in a deadly road rage incident in North Philadelphia. Traffic was backed up. A driver named Gregory Jackson honked his horn. What should have been a minor annoyance turned deadly. Thornton's associate, Eric Little Hawk Watkins, allegedly jumped out of the vehicle, assaulted Jackson, and then, after Thornton reportedly encouraged it, shot him in front of his wife. Jackson died. Years later, both men would be convicted for their roles in the killing. While Thornton sat behind bars, attention shifted towards someone much closer and much easier to reach, his cousin Bruce Kennedy. According to prosecutors, Aaron Jones ordered Christopher Anderson and James Anderson to kill Kennedy. Street rumors suggested there was more than one reason for the hit. Beyond internal JBM politics, people whispered that Jones and Kennedy had both been involved with the same woman, creating personal tensions that stretched far beyond business. Whatever the motivation, the result was deadly. On August 18, 1990, the two gunmen entered Mommy's Food Market at 54th and Harlan Streets in West Philadelphia. Kennedy was inside. At approximately 4:20 in the afternoon, gunfire erupted. Kennedy tried to defend himself and even managed to fire a shot back, but he was overwhelmed. He was struck 10 times and died inside the store. Carol Zachary, one of the store's owners, was also wounded during the shooting. Afterward, the gunmen discarded their weapons and clothing near train tracks by the Philadelphia Zoo before being picked up by JBM Lieutenant Rodney Frog Carson. Carson drove them directly to Aaron Jones. From there, arrangements were made to hide the shooters while the police searched for suspects. Ironically, Carson would eventually become one of the government's most valuable witnesses. By December, things were getting uglier. Inside Holmesburg Prison, Aaron Jones and Rodney Carson allegedly cornered another inmate, Hugh Moore. Investigators said the pair assaulted him and burned him with cigarettes while questioning him about the murder of Leroy Davis. Then came February 1991. Facing decades in prison and mounting charges of his own, Carson made a decision that changed everything. He cooperated. The longtime JBM lieutenant agreed to work with federal authorities. At nearly the same time, Jones was sentenced to 10 to 20 years for the prison stabbing case. But federal prosecutors were building something much bigger. On October 2nd, 1991, a federal grand jury returned a sweeping indictment against Aaron Jones, Bernard Fields, Brian Thornton, and 23 other defendants. The government accused them of participating in a massive drug conspiracy that stretched from 1985 through 1991 and involved heroin, cocaine, and crack cocaine distribution throughout Philadelphia. The trial was enormous. Prosecutors presented more than 60 wiretap conversations along with testimony from 10 cooperating witnesses. Even while the trial unfolded, Jones remained incarcerated at Rockview State Prison, serving time for the earlier assault conviction. Then came April 23, 1992. The federal government landed its knockout punch. Aaron Jones and Brian Thornton were convicted of operating a continuing criminal enterprise and conspiracy to distribute heroin and cocaine. The court also ordered each man to forfeit more than $6 million in assets. Bernard Fields was convicted on firearm-related charges and ordered to surrender additional assets as well. Federal Judge Marvin Katz handed down mandatory life sentences under federal drug kingpin laws. Jones officially received his sentence later that year. After that, the rest of the organization fell apart piece by piece. Throughout 1992, more JBM members were convicted on drug conspiracy charges. Others skipped trial altogether and accepted plea deals. Among those pleading guilty were Leonard Basil Patterson, Samuel Magic Brown, Anthony Tone Reed, Ronald Rock Mason, William Storm Purdue, Derek Williams, Sean Davis, Barry Richardson, and Christopher Dirty Black Laster. Just like that, the empire that had once controlled huge portions of Philadelphia was effectively dismantled. But Aaron Jones wasn't finished facing courtrooms. Even while serving life for federal drug trafficking, he still had to answer for Bruce Kennedy's murder. After a 9-day trial, Jones, Samuel Brown, and James Anderson were all convicted of first-degree murder and conspiracy. On January 22, 1993, Jones received the harshest sentence available, death. 3 days later, Brown and James Anderson were sentenced to life imprisonment. Christopher Anderson, however, took a different path. He cooperated with prosecutors, testified against the others, and pleaded guilty to third-degree murder. Because of that cooperation, he avoided a life sentence and instead received a term of 32 to 65 years. Years later, Anderson would complain that the government failed to properly protect him despite the risks he took by testifying. As for Aaron Jones, the man who once helped build one of the most powerful drug organizations Philadelphia had ever seen, he ultimately ended up exactly where he spent years trying to avoid. Not on a street corner, not in a luxury car, not running an empire, but sitting on death row at SCI Green, one of Pennsylvania's most secure prisons, hundreds of miles away from the streets where his rise began.